Hello, everyone. My name is Shalyn McCoy, and on behalf of the Foundation for Conservation of Atlantic Salmon, I'd like to say welcome to today's webinar. The series is made possible in part thanks to, of course, the contribution of the Government of Canada. For today's webinar, I'm really pleased to be introducing you to Isabelle Morissette from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Isabelle is a lifelong resident of Canada's capital region. She obtained an undergraduate degree in social sciences, international studies, and modern languages from the University of Ottawa, as well as a Master of Public Administration, International Administration from l'École nationale d'administration publique. Since becoming a federal public servant in 2010, Isabelle has held various policy, planning, and operations-related positions at Health Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and Infrastructure Canada. She has held a position of Senior Policy Advisor at Fisheries and Oceans Canada, International Fisheries Policy Division since June 2020. Her main responsibility is to represent and advance Canada's interests at the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization. She is also the chair of NASCO's North American Commission. Prior to joining the government, Isabelle volunteered to promote primary education for girls in Africa and worked for a Canadian-based market development consulting firm in China. When she's not reading, writing, or traveling, Isabelle enjoys cross-country skiing and perfecting her windsurfing skills at the family cottage in Laurentians, Quebec. So today, Isabelle is going to be talking, of course, on an overview of the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization, which is NASCO. So at the end of the presentation, we'll give an opportunity for questions and answers, and I'll help moderate that, and I'll let you know at that point in time how we're going to do that. But for right now, I would like to turn the webinar over to Isabelle so she can share her presentation. So Isabelle, welcome, and it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Thank you to the Foundation for the Conservation of Atlantic Salmon for inviting me to this webinar series. I'm very excited to be here and very excited to be presenting on the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization today. Hopefully this will help you better understand the important work that we do at NASCO and how it contributes to salmon conservation. Just bear with me for 2 seconds because it is a new program that I'm using right now, so it is not as user-friendly as I'm used to. So the slide that you see right now is sort of the international legal framework that is the basis for why NASCO exists. So some of you are probably already aware that under international law, more specifically the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the related fish stocks agreement, states are required to cooperate and manage high seas straddling and highly migratory fish stocks. Taken together, they're also called shared fish stocks. So these are the foundational treaties, if you will, for the existence of regional fisheries management organizations, what we like to call RFMOs, and NASCO is one of them. Canada also works bilaterally on shared transboundary fish stocks with countries such as the US, France, in respect of Saint-Pierre-and-Miquelon, so you know those two very tiny islands as south of Newfoundland, and also with Denmark in respect of Greenland. Not all of these relations are treaty-based, but we do maintain them as formally as we can to align decisions on total allowable catch, for example. So concretely what this means for DFO is that we represent and advance Canada's interests across much of the international fisheries policy and management agenda. Excuse me. So we negotiate quotas and regulatory measures for shared fish stocks. We contribute to the development of policies to ensure the sustainability of high seas fisheries. A few examples include ecosystem approach to fisheries management, transshipment, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, the so-called IUU fishing. We also participate in various collaborative working groups to advance this international work. All right. So now we're on to why NASCO was established specifically. So in the previous slides, I explained the legal framework for why NASCO was established in the first place. But concretely, the NASCO's story is that before the 1960s, salmon harvested in the North Atlantic was strictly done at the national level. But then some distant fisheries were established in West Greenland and the northern Norwegian Sea, so around the Faroe Islands, namely. So it became clear that the rational management of salmon stock could not only be achieved through national cooperation, it had to be done internationally as well. And by distant fisheries, what I mean is that they were establishing fisheries outside their territorial waters. Then came UNCLOS in 1982 with Article 66 covering anadromous fish specifically. So without reading the article per se, what it means for salmon is that in the case of West Greenland and the Faroe Islands, for example, they were obligated to cooperate internationally on the conservation and management of salmon stocks because one, they were harvesting outside their territorial waters, which in 1982 meant 12 nautical miles. And because two, they were harvesting salmon that originated in the rivers of other states. So in 1983, that's when NASCO was born. Some people say 1984 because that's when the Secretariat was established. So you will see both dates very often. So the Convention of NASCO prohibits its parties from fishing for Atlantic salmon beyond territorial waters. NASCO also negotiates regulatory measures for fisheries in West Greenland and around the Faroe Islands, which have greatly reduced the catch of salmon in these fisheries. There has been no commercial harvest by the Faroe Islands since the early 90s, and the Greenland fishery is currently an internal use fishery only. But beyond these regulatory measures, NASCO has a mandate to conserve, restore, and enhance Atlantic salmon. So as you see on the graph here, which you've probably already seen, it is from the 2019 State of the Atlantic Salmon that NASCO published. Salmon populations have declined very drastically since 1983. So it is now widely accepted that conservation and restoration of salmon stocks cannot be achieved through regulatory measures alone. So NASCO has broadened its base and now addresses a wide range of issues, including habitat protection and restoration and aquaculture. And a number of resolutions, agreements, and guidelines have been developed for that purpose. So this slide very briefly describes NASCO's mandated structure. NASCO's objective is to conserve, restore, enhance, and rationally manage Atlantic salmon through international cooperation, taking account of the best available scientific information. There are 6 NASCO parties that form the council. So there's Canada, Denmark in respect of the Faroe Islands and Greenland. There's the EU, Norway, Russian Federation, United Kingdom, and the United States. And soon we will also have Iceland back, who is joining again after leaving in, I think, 2009 or 8. France is not a party, but a very collaborative observer, given that it has a mixed stock fishery in Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon. There are also several NGOs that are accredited observers. FCAS is one of them. And so NGOs are allowed to share their views, but are not part of the decision-making process. That is up to the parties in council to do that. NASCO operates through the council, 3 commissions, those that you see on the map there, the Finance and Administration Committee, and the International Atlantic Salmon Research Board, or the board, and the Secretariat. So all 3 commissions provide a forum for consultation and cooperation between their members. They also negotiate regulatory measures, and they make recommendations to council on scientific research. I am currently the chair of the North American Commission, and I will remain so until 2024. And the only commission that Canada is not a part of is NEAC, so the Northeast Atlantic Commission. The research board exists to promote collaboration and cooperation on research into the causes of marine mortality of Atlantic salmon and the opportunities to counteract it. So those are the main bodies that constitute NASCO. So before I jump right into the slides, I would like to talk about one very fundamental benefit of conducting international relations beyond just the legal aspect that I've explained earlier. International relations allow nations to cooperate with each other. I've already addressed that. But it also pools resources and share information as a means to find solutions to global issues that go beyond any particular country or region. When we manage salmon stocks domestically, but are faced with a global threat like climate change, for example, we shouldn't feel like we need to manage that threat alone, right? So international relations is not just about defending domestic interests. It's really to collaborate toward a common goal. That said, Canada does benefit from the NASCO Convention because the regulatory measures that are negotiated at NASCO do reduce harvest in West Greenland, and thereby it relieves some pressure on Canadian origin salmon. On the aspect of resolutions and agreements that are adopted by NASCO, when we say that these commit parties and jurisdictions to achieve international goals for the conservation of salmon, it is actually a positive thing. It should not be considered as a limiting factor for domestic management. So that's very important to understand. In fact, resolutions and agreements are good examples of nations having pooled enough resources and information to determine an appropriate way forward on an overarching issue that is affecting salmon. The Williamsburg Resolution is a good example in that it sets clear science-based international objectives to minimize the impacts of aquaculture introductions, transfers, and transgenics on wild salmon stocks. Apparently, it is a little known fact in Canada that NASCO also develops best practices and guidelines, of course, taking into account the best available science, which are meant to support parties and jurisdictions, essentially, in the management of their fisheries. They are not there to dictate how parties should manage their fisheries, but NASCO does encourage their use because it is based on science and are toolbox essentially for parties to use in managing their salmon stocks. Another very important reason why NASCO is important for Canada is that it benefits salmon, or at least it makes every effort to do so. So there is transparent annual reporting on the status of mixed stock fisheries in the Faroe Islands, West Greenland, Labrador, and Saint-Pierre-Miquelon. There is mortality at sea research that individual countries have not put a lot of focus on because it's outside their jurisdictions. It's harder to find funding for, and essentially it's more efficient to work collaboratively, excuse me, on this type of research, basically. There are guidelines that NASCO develops. I've talked about those. Scientific advice that NASCO requests annually from the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea is invaluable to understand the status of salmon stocks across the North Atlantic and to support decision-making at NASCO. The NASCO Rivers database is an interactive map that shows salmon rivers and their stock status, which is also helpful, and soon I think will become a NASCO Atlas, which is in development currently. Parties and jurisdictions develop 5-year implementation plans and related annual progress reports. They both demonstrate progress on implementing NASCO's resolutions, agreements, and guidelines, more specifically on key areas of concern to NASCO. So management of salmon fisheries, habitat protection and restoration, and agriculture introduction and transfers. Then there's what we call theme-based special sessions that are meant to better understand emerging threats to salmon. I'll talk about those in a few slides, or maybe in the next slide, actually. But what I would like everyone to notice from this list is that NASCO has a vast repository of information and knowledge that is accessible to all, really, and that information should be appropriately used to make informed decisions on managing and conserving Atlantic salmon. So these are a few examples of theme-based special sessions. I think these are mostly recent ones too. And what TBSSs, is what we call them, are meant for is to allow the exchange of information and sharing of best practices on topic related to NASCO's resolutions, agreements, and guidelines. They are usually held over a half day or a whole day and include discussions that are held during the NASCO annual meeting. All of these reports are available online on the NASCO website, and I've included links to those at the end of this presentation. On the governance of NASCO, there is, I would say, the most important event of the year for NASCO, and that is the annual general meeting, which is held in June every year. And that's where NASCO bodies discuss all of the regular business, a lot of which I've covered in the previous slides, and the priorities for the year to come. So the annual meeting is hosted by each party and the Secretariat on a rotational basis. Last year, we were lucky enough to host the 40th annual meeting in Moncton. I believe that some of you who are here today have been part of the team who supported me in organizing this meeting. So hello guys, and thanks again for that. It was quite a feat. Next June, I believe the meeting will be held in Westport, Ireland. There's really two major highlights coming out of the 40th annual meeting. One is that NASCO organized a theme-based special session on climate change, which is a major concern, for several RFMOs, not just for NASCO. There's a lot of momentum on addressing the impacts of climate change on fish stocks. And this session was quite comprehensive, and the recommendations coming out of it will be considered by the working group who's looking at the future of NASCO, which I'll be talking about in a bit. Canada also hosted another special session. This one is an extraordinary special session, if you will. It's not a theme-based special session because it was something that Canada requested as part of this year's annual meeting. And it is a session on Indigenous perspectives on Atlantic salmon. And it was very positively received by the parties. So we were very happy about that. And in light of that special session, Canada tabled a paper proposing a path forward to improve the participation of Indigenous peoples at NASCO. So we're very hopeful that things will move in a positive direction on that front moving forward. There were also 3 new working groups that were established coming out of the annual meeting. One is on the future of NASCO. Another one is responsible for updating the current NASCO stocking guidelines. And the third one is on pink salmon, which is an emerging threat, not so much in Canada, but very much in the Northeast Atlantic. And if we look at Canada's mechanics for attending the annual meeting, what we do at DFO, which we are the government representative of Canada at NASCO, so we are responsible for developing Canada's negotiation mandate for the discussions that will be held in the various commissions meetings and for the decisions that will be made in council. We consult stakeholders and partners ahead of the annual meeting, usually in spring, around the end of April, usually. And that's before we finalize our mandate that is approved by our minister. Sometimes we consult stakeholders and partners on an ad hoc basis when there are issues and matters that we know will be discussed intersessionally by council. So they'll do that as well. But specifically for the annual meeting, we ask our stakeholders and partners to self-identify to be on the Canadian delegation to the annual meeting. So the people who will accompany us, besides the head of delegation, DFO advisors, and the appointed Canadian representatives, we usually have provincial representatives, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. We have Indigenous organizations and NGOs. FCAS often joins us, which is great. So moving on to almost the final slide. It's actually a very exciting moment for NASCO right now. We are looking at a 10-year strategic planning exercise to better manage and conserve wild Atlantic salmon. So what the working group is doing is essentially assessing and prioritizing more than 50 recommendations that stem from the external performance review of NASCO that was undertaken in 22-23. Both International Year of the Salmon Symposia the one from 2019 and the one that was held last year in Vancouver, and the theme-based special session on climate change that was held this year. So we're looking at all of these recommendations, and hopefully we will narrow it down to a strategy and action plan that will be presented to Council at the 2024 annual meeting. And we will also plan for the 4th reporting cycle. So remember when I talked about the implementation plans that parties develop every 5 years? Well, 2024 is the last year of the current reporting cycle, so we will be trying to improve the 4th reporting cycle from what we've learned from the 3rd reporting cycle. So all of that is very much in the air, in the works, and I'm very excited to be part of that, and would very much love to hear your ideas if you have any, now that you've listened and learned about NASCO. And I will leave you with useful links, and I think, yes, I think that is it. I will go back to the useful links page for the question period, because that's probably what you find most useful. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much, Isabel. That was excellent. We're going to open the floor to question and answers. There's 2 options to do this. You can always raise your little hand and I will unmute you so you can ask your own questions. If you want to type it in, then I can always read it out loud as well. So we'll give a chance to the folks to do that. And I'm going to look at my screen here. In the meantime, there is a couple of folks that were wondering, Isabel, if they could have access, or if a copy of the slide deck could be shared. Is that it?
That should not be a problem. I will do that right after this.
Okay. So now we have a question coming in from Gary Spencer. I'm going to try to unmute you. Just a second. Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you for taking my question, and thank you for your presentation. I've followed NASCO from a distance for some time, and I was hoping to hear more about progress by the Government of Canada towards obtaining their aquaculture plan. NASCO has rejected Canada's aquaculture plan 2 or more times, if I recall correctly. And what's happening on that file, which I and many of my NGO colleagues consider to be the top file of importance for wild Atlantic salmon conservation.
Thanks for your question. It is a very important topic for NASCO and for Canada as well. And since the beginning of the current reporting cycle, we've been trying to improve our implementation plan, especially on the aspect of aquaculture. And it is a challenge, but we have been working with the provinces on ways to improve our implementation plan, and it's still work in progress, and we will determine, or we'll see if the next reporting cycle will change the way agriculture is reported at NASCO. That may help how we approach things, but at the moment, we are not revising our implementation plan for the current reporting cycle. We will be focusing on the next reporting cycle and try to improve there.
Well, the management of aquaculture on the West Coast differs significantly from the management of aquaculture on the East Coast. So is this discussed with our NASCO partners, and how do you rationalize that?
Well, the main difference between West and East is that DFO is not the regulator of aquaculture in the East is the provinces. And that's something that we try to explain to NASCO, because it comes with certain challenges, but the efforts are there every single time we present our annual report to NASCO. So it will continue to be work in progress. But I can't tell you at this point what it will look like in the near future.
Thank you.
Just seeing if there's any more questions. We have a little bit more time here, if there's any. In case someone thinks of oh, there's one coming in here now. Okay, it's one that I'm going to read out loud. How do the discussions, negotiations, or resolutions filter down to DFO operational staff who work on Atlantic salmon? Does it affect budget or research that is or will be conducted?
Communication is something that we do struggle with, because there is so much work going on at NASCO that we sometimes forget to communicate down to the operational staff. And that's something that we are working on, especially with the help of our domestic fisheries policy team, who's been working on the domestic Atlantic salmon strategy. So I am personally very committed to improving the way we share information internally, because it will certainly help in the development of our mandate, for sure. While we are very well covered on the science side, so we have dedicated science colleagues in the department that support us, but on the management side, there are a few gaps, and so there is definitely a need there to improve how we communicate to management folks, so to operational folks. Could you clarify your question on offsetting research, please?
The second part of that question, it writes, does it affect budget or research that is or will be conducted? So from any discussions or negotiations that are done, like, will it trickle down and affect budget or research?
Not broadly speaking, no, but there are certain initiatives, scientific initiatives that NASCO undertakes that Canada participates in. For example, the West Greenland sampling program. We have scientists going to Greenland every year to support that kind of research. But, you know, if there's new research coming down the line from NASCO, we would, as much as possible, consult internally first, because we can't just commit to doing more research if we know we don't have the resources for, or if we're not sure that we're going to get the budget for. So we always make sure to consult internally first.
Okay. I don't see any more right now, Isabel, but if anybody thinks of something after the presentation, which often happens, you're like, oh, I should have asked this, please feel free to send me an email, or even Isabel, she had her email address here on the before last slide, and we'll do our best to, oh, I think Gary has another question here, Isabel, so just a second, I will unmute him. Go ahead, Gary.
Thanks again. Many organizations I'm involved in would be eager to make submissions directly to NASCO rather than to the government of Canada and then to NASCO. Is there opportunity for that?
If you are part of an accredited NGO, and to be accredited, you do need to send a submission for becoming an accredited NGO, and you do that through the NASCO Secretariat. But if you already are, then you are more than welcome to send submissions to NASCO directly. I'm not sure, because I think accredited NGOs are organized in a way that they consult their partner NGOs in order to present in a single front at NASCO, or share their common views at NASCO, as opposed to doing it individually. So I would check with I can't remember who is leading, but I know that ASF is very much involved on the coordination of several accredited NGOs, so you might want to start there.
Thanks again.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Isabel. I think it was a great presentation. Thank you, everyone, for asking the questions. So this session here, there's some folks that wanted to be here today. I got some emails and could not. So as all our webinar sessions, we do have it recorded, and it is available on our YouTube page that you can access through our website. So this will be the same for the NASCO presentation here today. And also, before leaving, I just want to remind everyone, we actually have another one here in November coming up in a couple of weeks. It's on the 29th of November. It's going to be Tara Imlay, who's going to be talking about spatial synchronicity in body length changes for Atlantic salmon over 5 decades. So please join us at that time. But once again, Isabel, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it, and for everybody joining us. So I hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you.